certificates and badges by the group and had to pose for photos near the waterfront. The four were then driven to the Gaza border by the Red Cross, handed over to the IDF, a thumbs up and a heart sign for the cameras. And then reunited with their waiting families after 15.5 months being held hostage.
It's been a very, very emotional day today, with tears all around, with people sitting on the edges of their seats, watching television, family members, friends surrounding the various locations, whether it's in the south or at the hospital, Beilinson Hospital. The images that are coming out from the joining their family members are very, very powerful, and goes to show how the whole country has been holding its breath today.
Karina Ariev, Daniela Gilboa, Nahma Levy and Liri Olberg were all IDF surveillance officers, captured at the Nahal Oz base on the morning of October the 7th and bundled into jeeps at gunpoint and taken into Gaza. The four were airlifted to a hospital outside Tel Aviv, where they will now stay in the coming days for physical and mental support. On board one of the helicopters, a smiling Liri Olberg posed for this photo, the words, "I'm back," written on a sign.
We are meeting them after 477 days in Hamas captivity. This is an unimaginable reality. We, the medical teams in the healthcare system, stand ready to address any medical need that may arise.
In Gaza, Palestinians were waiting to finally cross back to the north of the Strip as part of the ceasefire deal. Israeli forces were supposed to leave the Netzarim corridor on day 7, but Benjamin Netanyahu said that that would not happen today because Hamas had violated the deal. Israel says the group should have released a civilian, Arbel Yehud. In a statement, Hamas said that she was still alive and would be freed next weekend. The second exchange in this ceasefire happened not without complication, but perhaps more smoothly and more quickly than last week. It will now be another long and tense 7 days before the next hostage-prisoner exchange. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News, at the Re'im military base on the Gaza border.
Well, there were scenes of celebration in Ramallah in the West Bank, where many of the Palestinian prisoners were returned to their families. In all, 200 were freed today, including more than 120 serving life sentences. Others had been held without charge. From Ramallah, Adam Parsons reports.
In the midst of this frenzy, coaches carrying around 60 prisoners returned here to the West Bank to be greeted by a wall of emotion. Among the crowd, Safia, waiting for her son Ishmael. In Israel, convicted of attempted murder, but to her and most in this throng, saluted as a hero.
We're thanking God. This is our state of mind. Thanking God for this life. Thank God.
This a prayer of gratitude for her son's return.
It is noisy and it is chaotic, but here there is a sense of jubilation as well, because for many in this crowd, these coaches and the prisoners inside them represent a victory over Israel.
Again and again, we hear chants in support of Hamas. The released prisoners taken to a community centre for health checks. Some went on to hospital, but most emerged into the embrace of family, friends and well-wishers. This man is Ahmed Musa, released after 13 years behind bars. He claimed he'd often been beaten in prison right up until his final hours. He was overjoyed at freedom.
My message to all the Palestinian people, wherever they are, including in Gaza, West Bank and abroad, you have mastered the art of creating joy despite the hardship and the genocide we are dealing with. And to all the free people, I say this: prisoners in Israeli prison are dealing with the worst.
120 prisoners found guilty of the gravest crimes were expelled from Israeli territory. Just over half deported to Egypt, the rest sent into Gaza. Here on the West Bank, the sight of these men coming back from captivity seemed like a seminal moment for many. But the spectre of conflict goes on.
I think the future is going to be more sadness for us. Because, you know what I mean, like everything will get bad from Israel occupation for us. I think, especially in West Bank.
Are you scared?
Yeah, of course.
These men were convicted by Israeli courts of some of the most serious crimes possible. Yet now, suddenly, they're free. And that is the price Israel is paying for its hostages.
Well, Adam joins me live now from Ramallah. And Adam, this exchange wasn't without its complications, but went off relatively smoothly compared to last weekend. Will both sides be deeming this a success?
I think they probably will. Yeah, compared to last weekend, very different. The prisoners who arrived here in the West Bank were released hours and hours earlier than last weekend. But I think, just like last weekend, so much of this will be seen through the prisms of imagery. So firstly, of course, Israel has this incredibly potent image of these 4 young women who've been held in captivity and have now, through what Israel would say its diplomatic efforts, been brought back to their families through the pressure that has been exerted on Hamas through that military campaign. But then here in the West Bank, the imagery is completely different. It is those prisoners being greeted as returning heroes. And in Gaza, well, of course, the imagery there is about Hamas parading these hostages before trying to almost appear to take the upper hand in pushing them back towards Israel. Ultimately, each party will say they have come out of this better and strengthened. And yet tonight in the West Bank, there are more clashes between Israeli forces and Palestinians. So while on the one hand we have this ceasefire, this exchange of prisoners, here, miles from where I'm standing, the familiar, weary, old problems and old tensions and old fissures are opening up once again.
Adam, thank you. The Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, and Technology Secretary, Peter Kyle, have written a joint letter to tech companies piling pressure over access to dangerous and illegal content. The letter, seen tonight by Sky News, follows the jailing of Southport killer Axel Rudakabana, who'd viewed violent material online. Our People and Politics correspondent, Nick Martin, is in Westminster for us tonight. And Nick, what does the letter say?
Well, this letter is extremely powerful and actually reiterates previous points made by previous governments on the importance that social media companies take action in removing content which is both violent and harmful, especially to children. Now, this letter actually sets out in a huge amount of detail what the government now expects of social media companies in their obligation to strip out this dangerous material so that people like Alex Rudabakana cannot go searching through the internet and be inspired to carry out such horrific attacks. Now, the letter starts by saying that the social media companies were written to in November 2024 in outlining content that had previously been used in terror and violent trials and asking social media companies back then to remove that content. The letter says, given the horrific crimes of Alex Rudabakana, this is now even more important, and it sets out the added impetus now on social media companies to remove dangerous, violent material. And specifically, it says that by March, it wants social media companies to remove illegal content which is violent and could influence children, to remove that from their platforms to protect especially children and members of the public. It says by the summer it wants content which might be deemed legal but also harmful to children also to be removed. It also says that Alex Rudabakana, who was convicted last week of the murder of those 3 children in Southport, accessed dangerous material online not just weeks before the attack, but on the day of the attack. And specifically, they mentioned that he Googled an attack in Australia, content that the Australians had removed online, but was still available in the United Kingdom. They are saying to social media companies tonight, act now and remove this material. And I'll read you some of what the letter says tonight. It says, the ease of access to such dangerous illegal content is unacceptable. We must prevent further unlawful access to instructional material by those wishing to do harm to the United Kingdom. We are again requesting that you, as industry leaders, swiftly remove any unlawful material on this list available on your services, including the material used by Axel Rudabakana. I mean, this letter has a sense of frustration about it, because governments have been pleading, frankly, with social media companies for a long time to strip out this content. And it will now form a big part, I'm sure, of the proposed public inquiry into the Southport attacks, but actually poses so many more questions about how social media companies manage this material and the willingness that they have to remove it when asked.
OK, Nick, thank you very much. More weather warnings have been issued after Storm Eowyn left at least 1 person dead and more than 1 million without power across the island of Ireland and Scotland. Crews tried to make the most of calmer conditions to get people reconnected to the grid today. Our Ireland correspondent Stephen Murphy reports.
The trees come down, the crews go up. A mammoth repair job is now underway right across the island of Ireland. Here in South Dublin, a large tree has crashed down, severing power to around 50 homes on this street, just as the temperatures drop again.
How inconvenient has it been for you guys?
See the icicles hanging from my nose?
The house is cold.
This house is very cold.
ESB network crews are stretched to the limit. With no part of the country spared from storm damage, crews can't be brought in from other areas. It's almost certain they'll ask for help from abroad.
Given the unprecedented numbers, I imagine that we're going to be asking our UK colleagues, French colleagues, contracting partners around Ireland and the UK to give whatever assistance they can provide us. This is an unprecedented storm. The damage is record-breaking for any storm we've seen here in the country before. This sort of work is going to be a very familiar sight right across Ireland for the next few days, maybe even a week. And as you can see at the moment, the weather is fine. There's hardly any wind, but there is further bad weather forecast over the next 24 hours. And the worry is that could hamper this kind of work.
This is all that remained of an ice rink in West Dublin, brought down by winds that also left hundreds of thousands without water or broadband. The storm claimed the life of a young man in Donegal, police today naming him as 20-year-old Kacper Dudek, killed when a tree fell on his car. The Met Office has said Eowyn was probably the strongest storm in 10 years to hit the UK. Repair work continues in Scotland, which experienced gusts of 100 miles per hour. This co-op in Denny and Falkirk badly damaged by the high winds. Network Rail Scotland is restoring services which had all been suspended. Here in Glasgow, its inspection helicopter found a roof on the tracks, blown off a nearby building. Elsewhere in Glasgow, the Premiership match between Celtic and Dundee was called off after the storm damaged Celtic's Parkhead Stadium. The bad news is more stormy weather is on the way. The Met Office has issued new weather warnings for tomorrow and Monday. Wind, rain, snow, ice and localised flooding, all possible in areas across the UK. Wind and rain warnings have also been issued by Met Éireann in Ireland for Sunday, all of which delays the recovery from what was already a record-breaking storm. Stephen Murphy, Sky News in Dublin.
More than 230 years after its first shop opened in central London, WH Smith could be turning the page on an historic part of its business. Sky News has revealed that the company is in talks to sell off its high street division so it can focus on more profitable branches in airports and railway stations. Our North of England correspondent Shingi Mararike reports.
It's a name etched into the history of the British High Street, but WH Smith looks set to sell an arm of its business that began more than 2 centuries ago, cementing a move away from stationery supplies and books. The modern WH Smith now has a different focus and a growing presence away from the middle of our towns and cities. Outside of their only city centre store in Leeds, people are unsurprised.
Well, I have a newspaper, but it's delivered. I have books, but I use a library. Don't need to go into Smith's.
If it's not profitable, then they should close it. I'm not attached to the brand.
Well, I guess it's just symptomatic of the high street, isn't it? I mean, you know, whether it's rents or business rates or whatever, high street's struggling.
Sky News understands the company could confirm the plans as early as next week, as part of its new focus on a traveller, selling a wider range of products with stores based in stations and airports.
The potential sale of a piece of high street heritage is a reminder that the retail sector is shifting, with more of a focus online, or in WH Smith's case, a more profitable retail travel business.
Retail experts say in the current economic climate, decisions like these are logical.
Compared to, let's say, 10 years ago, it's a lot more expensive to run stores on high streets than was the case before. And so many retailers are saying, we don't need as many shops. And obviously in the case of WH Smith, they're saying perhaps we don't need any retail high street shops at all.
In a statement, WH Smith said it was exploring strategic options, including a possible sale, with no guarantee any agreement will be reached. If it does go ahead, it could represent another landmark loss to the British High Street. Shingi Marike, Sky News, Leeds.
He's known as Europe's last dictator, and with tomorrow's election largely a foregone conclusion, there seems no end in sight to Alexander Lukashenko's 30-year hold on Belarus. Even those slated to run against the president are complimentary of his rule, as the government looks to avoid a repeat of mass protests that followed the election last time round. Our Moscow correspondent Ivor Bennett reports.
In Belarus, they're gearing up for a presidential election. But unlike most votes, the winner isn't in doubt. After more than 3 decades in power, Alexander Lukashenko's set for a 7th term, even though he's not campaigning. He recently told factory workers he's too busy. But he also has no need to worry. His so-called rivals, like Communist Party leader Sergei Sirankov, won't even criticize him. Instead, he endorses him and calls him Batka, an affectionate nickname for father.
Batka is not only the one we have to thank for a child's birth. Batka will also feed the child, protect them, get them on their feet, and create all the conditions for their development and confidence in their future.
But there was nothing loving about how Batka responded to this. Mass protests after his last re-election when he was accused of stealing victory. A brutal crackdown saw tens of thousands detained. Opposition leader Svetlana Tsikhanovskaya has been in exile ever since and is calling for an election boycott.
It will be like imitation, it will be farce. We call it special electoral operation. It will be like reappointment of dictator by dictator. All these 5 people who are participating, it's like fan club of Lukashenko.
It's highly unlikely there'll be any protests this time around, because there aren't really any protesters left. They're all either in prison or in exile. Some have recently been released by Lukashenko in a sign he wants to repair relations with the West. But he has a long way to go to do that. According to human rights groups, there are still well over 1,000 political prisoners here.
Among them, Maria Kolesnikova, who's serving an 11-year term on extremism charges. Her sister Tatiana fears for Maria's life.
She continues to be strong, yes. She's very strong and courageous person, but at the same time, I understand that everything has its limits, and how much longer she can preserve such strongness in her.
No such problems for the man described as Europe's last dictator. who seems to have granted himself an almost holy status. Ivor Bennett, Sky News, Minsk.
Time now to catch up on all the latest sports news with Dave.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
Players that fall out of the academy system need something to fall back on.
Do you think we have a responsibility to not only produce elite players, but also good people?
This is the key point.
I've had a really in-depth look into academy football and how it works with certain clubs.
Can you all play in our first team? No, and we're really realistic with the boys. The success is reaching your full potential.
Coming up in this episode, I'll find out what the whole package looks like for the academy footballers.
First and foremost, they try to create a good young person. At the time, I didn't realise how it can sort of help you, both on and off the pitch.
I'd been there since I was 5.5, so I came through the whole way. The staff who was always there, I'm talking about the whole, the staff, I'm not just about the staff who were on the pitch, I'm talking about the kitchen staff, the medical stuff, the people who clean our kits and stuff, they mean everything. So I'm playing out now on the pitch, but I just hope that they've got a massive smile on their face because I'm doing it for them as well.
It's been a special rise for me and the club. I think there's lots of different ups and downs. As much as we all want to become professional footballers, I think it's hard. Not everyone can do it. First and foremost, they try to create a good young person. Definitely the club's been very good at that, whilst also making it enjoyable on the pitch as well.
Clubs are investing significant amounts of money themselves into academies, and it's growing every year. But there's big money to be made in return. With academy sales representing pure profit, and more teams struggling to meet profit and sustainability rules, selling homegrown players with very little experience has become a crucial business strategy. Just look at the increase in the last few seasons. And some clubs excel at it. Manchester City and Chelsea bringing in nearly £500 million combined in academy sales since 2016.
Given how much players are worth to the clubs, are they looking after them enough? We've seen the highs and we've seen the lows. So what else is the game doing to protect its young players, 91% of whom never play a professional game?
The jury took just 3¼ hours to return a unanimous verdict of guilty for both Moses Swabu and Delroy Facey on the single charge of a conspiracy to commit bribery. Swabu from Bermondsey, he used to be a Crystal Palace trainee, but plied his trade in the lower leagues. The prosecution said he's gone to a younger player and asked him if he would be prepared to rig a football match for money. That isn't just relaying messages as per Mr. Swabu's defence, it is akin to being the getaway driver in a robbery, he told the jury. Swabu was sentenced to 16 months in prison for match fixing. He now works with clubs and governing bodies like FIFA to try to protect young players who, when released or when they drop down the leagues, can fall prey to criminal gangs.
I'll say the reality from my experience, it's almost like death. I've seen the reaction or the chain reaction from it. Once you get released or you drop out the game, what am I going to do? It's the pressure of, okay, how am I going to make money? This is where...
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the political and PR consultant, Leon Emirali, and the journalist and author, Christina Patterson. Amongst the stories, we'll be discussing this on the front of The Observer. Its headline, Move Closer to Europe, Not Trump, Voters Tell Starmer. We'll be right back with that story and others. Do stay with us.